How many families could have acted sooner if someone had just noticed what their hands were doing? Over 80% of seniors with dementia show subtle behavioral changes, and hand behavior is one of the first systems to go off track. A wave of research shows that when someone you love starts using their hands in strange, unexplained ways, it may be the brain's first cry for help. In this video, you'll discover 7 bizarre things seniors do with their hands that quietly signal cognitive decline. What you learn here could help protect someone you love before it's too late. Let's begin. Number 1. Fidgeting with invisible objects. At 76, Elaine just looked distracted. She'd sit on the couch and move her fingers like she was twisting thread or adjusting something small. Her son assumed it was just a leftover habit from her years on the factory line. But over time, the behavior shifted. She began fixing things that weren't broken, waving her hands at the TV, tapping the air near doorknobs, or miming button presses on appliances that weren't even on. One evening, she stood in the kitchen, slowly rotating her fingers in front of the microwave. When asked what she was doing, she said, "I'm tuning it in so it hears me better." That was the moment her son pushed for a neurological exam. Doctors diagnosed her with Alzheimer's nearly 2 years after the first hand movements began. Studies show dementia can affect the brain's motor memory and spatial awareness early on. Seniors may repeat hand routines from the past, even when they no longer fit the moment. These movements might look harmless, but they often signal the brain is falling back on old patterns because it can't keep up with the present. New dementia videos daily. Feel free to subscribe. Number 2. Putting their hands in strange places. Lewis was 70 when his wife first noticed something strange, 2 years before his Alzheimer's diagnosis. Every time he sat down on the couch, in the car, and at dinner, he'd slide his hands under his thighs. She asked if he was cold, and he just smiled, saying, "It feels right this way." At first, she brushed it off as nothing, but within a few months, he started doing it everywhere. At church, in waiting rooms, even while talking to neighbors. Sometimes he'd keep one hand clenched under him and refuse to move it. Then, things started getting stranger. At a family barbecue, he wouldn't eat, saying, "My hands are busy right now," even though they weren't. That week, his wife finally scheduled a full evaluation and got the result she already suspected. Experts confirm that early dementia can affect how the brain processes movement, touch, and body awareness. Hiding or clutching the hands may be a way to create stability or respond to a confused sense of space. When these habits appear repeatedly and without reason, they often mark early cognitive decline. Number 3. Hiding things in their hands. Nora began keeping tissues balled up in her hand. At first, her son thought it was just a nervous habit, but over time, Nora started holding on to other things. Coins, buttons, bottle caps, always clenched tightly in her palm, refusing to let go. When asked about it, she'd say, "I'm saving this for later," even if it had no purpose. Soon, the behavior grew harder to ignore. One morning, her daughter found a tiny screw buried in Nora's bed sheets. In a few weeks, she noticed her mother eating with one hand while the other stayed closed under the table. That was the moment she decided to stop waiting and called for an evaluation. Nora was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease at age 82, nearly 2 years after the first signs began. Neurologists explain that as dementia develops, the brain may trigger behaviors rooted in anxiety, sensory feedback, or a need for control. Clutching small items in the hand can provide comfort, but when it becomes compulsive or symbolic, it often points to deeper cognitive disorientation. Because most people brush off small physical changes as just aging. Strange hand habits might seem harmless at first, just quirks or nervous energy, but they're often the brain's first warning sign, long before memory loss begins. If someone you love is showing these changes, don't wait. Get them help. Let's keep going. Number 4. Tapping or drumming on surfaces. Just a year before his diagnosis of Alzheimer's, Ron, 73, began tapping his fingers on the armrest of his recliner, the same rhythm, over and over. His wife assumed it was just boredom, but he started doing it everywhere. On the kitchen table, in the car, during church. When she asked him to stop, he'd look confused and say, "I'm keeping the timing." A few months later, he began tapping doors before opening them and counting softly under his breath. Then things got more disturbing. One night, she found him, sitting at the edge of the bed, drumming the same 5 beats on his knees for hours until the morning. That's the day she finally decided to call their doctor and got the result she already feared. A large-scale research revealed that repetitive tapping or drumming can appear in early dementia, when the brain's executive function and motor regulation begin to break down. These movements may act as a coping mechanism, giving the person a sense of rhythm, focus, or control in moments of confusion. While they may seem like small habits, they often reflect deeper problems with planning and behavior regulation. Number 5. Waving at people who aren't there. At 79, Evelyn began smiling and waving toward empty parts of the room. Her son thought she was just daydreaming, but soon she was doing it several times a day, waving at the hallway, the corner of the porch, or across the yard. When asked who she was waving at, she'd say, "That nice man who always checks on us." Soon it escalated. One afternoon, she stopped mid-conversation and waved past her daughter's shoulder, whispering, "Don't worry, she's friendly." The family finally scheduled a full evaluation the next day. It took nearly 2 years after that first hand wave for Evelyn to be diagnosed with Lewy body dementia. Scientists confirm that visual hallucinations are one of the most common early signs of Lewy body dementia. When the brain begins misinterpreting space or memory, it may fill in the gaps with imagined people or figures. Waving may seem harmless, but it's often a clear sign that the brain is blurring the line between reality and confusion. Number 6. Staring at or inspecting their own hands. Just a year before his diagnosis of Alzheimer's, Glenn, 80, started staring at his hands for long stretches of time. His wife assumed he was just zoning out, but it kept happening. At breakfast, in the car, even while talking. He'd slowly rotate his wrists, touch his fingers, or hold his palms open like he didn't recognize them. When she asked what he was doing, he said, "These don't feel like mine." Over the next few months, things worsened. One day, he spent over an hour in the bathroom mirror, turning his hands back and forth in silence. That was the moment his wife finally sought professional help and regretted not acting sooner. Doctors have observed that when dementia disrupts body awareness and sensory feedback, some seniors begin dissociating from their own limbs. Hands start to feel unfamiliar or disconnected. This often marks early damage in the parietal and temporal lobes, a subtle but powerful sign of cognitive decline. Number 7. Holding their hands in unusual positions. 69-year-old Kathleen began resting her hands in a prayer pose, not just at church, but while watching TV, eating, or sitting in silence. Her family found it endearing and thought nothing of it, but the pose started lasting longer. Sometimes she'd hold it for an hour without moving. When her daughter gently asked if she was praying, Kathleen said, "No, just listening." But it didn't stop there. One day, she was found standing by the front door, with her hands pressed together, eyes closed, and no response to her name. That's when her family called the neurologist, and Kathleen was later diagnosed with Alzheimer's. For nearly 2 years, they dismissed the signs as charming and blamed themselves for it later. Research shows that when dementia affects motor control and behavior, Some seniors develop fixed hand positions as a way to self-soothe or feel grounded. These positions may not serve a purpose, but they give the brain a familiar rhythm in an unfamiliar world, and they often signal a deeper loss of mental flexibility. If someone you love is showing these signs, don't wait, because by the time memory loss begins, the damage is already far along. Catching these early changes might be your only chance to slow it down.
And there you have it. What are your thoughts? Next, dive into this video for more essential tips to transform your health and help you thrive. You're going to love it. Thanks for watching Healthy End, and we'll see you there.